There is no flashy intro. Die. Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Play Super Slee / Contra 2 / whatever the Probotector 2 title is. Before we get into this, I want to note you should press right, left, down, up, A, and B, and then start in pretty fast fashion to get 10 lives at the start of the game, instead of starting with the Contra Standard 3. Though there are different codes for different versions, like in Probotector 2, I think you get 30 lives with right, left, down, up, A, B, and starts. And I think the same for Japanese. It's 30 lives versus 10, depending on the version. Alright, so getting into this, it's Contra 2. If you played the first game, you know how to play the second one. You run and gun, you get various upgrades that change your charge shot, or your shot type, be it a machine gun, a laser, a flamethrower, or the one you should get, which you can get, I think, in the 3rd or 4th power-up capsule that scrolls across the screen in Stage 1 here. It's the spread gun, which has ridiculous spread, higher rapid fire, and just kills everything, really. And now I don't actually have it. Yeah, that's not until the next thing. I think this is the flare gun. Level 1 isn't too much to worry about. In fact, difficulty-wise, even though you still have, very limited lives and continues in this game, and if you get a game over, like a proper game over, you're back to the start of the game. Contra 2 at its hardest is still easier than Contra 1 at its hardest, I feel. Super C, I think, is just, in general, the easier game. Because I feel it's not that they throw less at you, they still throw a lot of enemies at you, but I feel as long as you take your time with a good pace, you're nowhere near as bombarded by enemies as you could be in Contra 1. With that said, we're already coming up on the boss of Stage 1, which is going to be a helicopter coming from the top left of the screen. This is a two-part fight. The first part, you need to shoot up at the guns on the helicopter and take them out. There's 4 of them and enough shots to take them out, and at which point, at the center of the helicopter, its core will be revealed, and you just need to destroy that, and it's done. It's an easy first boss. With that said, watch out for the soldiers spawning at the left and right, because if you're focused too much on the helicopter, they might surprise you, and, with one-shot kills in this game, that's a live lost, as well as your spread gun lost. Alright, let's go over the plot. Wait, no, let's not, because we have a new thing to talk about. New to Super C are top-down missions. These replace the base raids from Contra 1. You control an 8-directional movement, but ultimately, the mechanics of the game don't change too much. There's still power-up containers that scroll across the screen every now and then that can contain spread guns, machine guns, bombs to clear the screen. The works, really. You just have to keep in mind that enemies can come at you from more directions with this. With that said, I actually feel these stages are easier on average than the side-scrolling levels in the game, as you have more space to avoid shots with. Like, I can avoid shots by standing between them like that. Whereas in the normal stages, you can't do that nearly as easily. Even though there's only 2 of these in the game, they heavily contribute to what I said earlier with this game being easier than Contra 1. There will still be points where things can get a bit crowded, don't get me wrong. I'm thinking in particular of, I think, Stage 4 or 5? Or what's Stage 6? Alright, now that we're on our way to the boss, so let's go over the plot for this game. Don't fire until you see the red of their eyes. Slipping cold lemonade with a couple of native lovelies, Mad Dog and Scorpion, the 2 playable characters, guerrilla warriors extraordinaire, relax on a Rio beach and boast of how they destroyed the vile alien warmonger, Red Falcon. That's the first game's final boss. Little do they know that the Red Falcon didn't flee with his pointed tail between his legs. Instead, he tactically retreated to round up ruffians of the universe, friends from all walks of war, to mount a second assault on planet Earth. One of these new recruits is Jagger Freud, a demented alien from the Black Hole Galaxy, who dishes out punishment with a laser-sharp tongue. Red Falcon has also shuttled in the Babalu Destructoid mechanism, a giant alien tank, which was the primary weapon used to disintegrate the innocent solar system of Tralala. But the genius behind the Red Falcon's Earth-conquering concept is his plan to have thousands of intergalactic warriors seep into the brains of the U.S. Army. It's a mind contamination trick, which has already taken command of the U.S. forces at Fort Firestorm, which was Stage 1. How do we know that our soldiers have been brainwashed? Or brain trashed? Interesting. You can see it in their eyes. Now, if Mad Dog and Scorpion fail to recuperate from their months on the beach in time to destroy the Red Falcon's GI fortified hate nest, his sinister scheme will permeate the world's mightiest power, nuclear missile silos included. If that happens, well, I'll be pushing up daisies. Yeah, that's an NES plotline. For certain. Now, I should go over the various weapons in the game, because the last time we did Contra was Contra 1, but that was a live LP with Scott, where we were more so just having fun. I didn't really talk about the mechanics back when. Your basic gun's a standard machine gun, which there is a proper machine gun that has higher rapid fire, and with, I think, the R power, you can power up that rapid fire even more. There's the spread gun, which fires in 5 directions, and if you actively take care of sprite limits, you can actually focus those shots pretty actively onto one target, which the speed run for Contra 1 uses, as I believe this game's does. There's the laser, which is just a straightforward shot that is single burst, but can do some pretty high damage on a single target. And the flamethrower, which is the flare, what I called the flare gun earlier, which you fire forward and then it explodes in 4 directions around the destination. It's pretty useful, but there's no reason to never use the spread gun, I feel, as its coverage is more than worth any of the sacrifices. And as for the other power-ups, there's the rapid fire, a barrier, which is an invincibility power if you become invincible for a few seconds, and the mega shell, which is the thing I called a bomb earlier. Any enemies on screen just get taken out. And now it's time for one of the most annoying mini-bosses in the game. This is the Babalu Destructoid mechanism. This thing's going to slowly walk left and right, firing bouncy balls out of its cannons that you need to duck under for the middle one, and then hope you're not close enough to the lower cannons to get hit by it. I would think they want you to jump over that, but I always have trouble jumping over larger enemy sprites in the Contra games, so I'm not exactly sure if that's what they intend, honestly. I don't like that fight, all the same. It's also one of the few enemies name dropped in the manual, which is weird. Either way, level 3, the early portion seems like it could be annoying because you have that entire water crawl segment. But you just move a little slower there. There's no active gameplay difference aside from the fact I don't think you can crouch and fire at the same time while you're in the water. With that said, as long as you aim your gun diagonally, you're never going to get hit by anything anyway, and you can just duck beneath anything else. Alright, boss of stage 3 is this weird gun wall. There are 5 parts of this boss fight, but I think you only need to destroy the central core that's glowing red in the center. The 4 pink and blue bits are just extra weapons that are firing at you. You can destroy them, but it's not actively required, I believe. With that said, I recommend taking out at least maybe 2 of them, so that you have points where you can just jump up and fire directly at the core without much interference. If you're more of the cautious player type, taking out all 4 of the turrets is still a very valid strategy, though, especially considering the fewer there are, the easier it is to take out more of them. But at that point, the boss can do nothing to kill you, so it's just a case of do you want to spend more or less time on this boss fight. Stage 3 has its annoyances, particularly that mini-boss, and the way the ground collapses beneath you after the mini-boss can be a little bit hard to predict on how it's going to fall out unless you've played the game through a couple times before. But ultimately, I'd say it's still easier than the latter half of Contra 1. Alright, speaking of where the difficulty spikes, this is, I'd say, where the game starts to pick up a little bit in difficulty, as this stage, outside of having just a bunch of targets for you to destroy that can also kill you, like these weird bubbles, is also where the game starts to lead you into more danger rather than you walking into it yourself. First off, you got these ceilings here, which you need to stand beneath the platforms because they are active bombs that fall for some reason. You know, it only does that like twice. We have a vertical stage, and vertical stages in Contra are usually a bit harder than the horizontal structured ones as it is, for a couple reasons. First off, the fact that everything below me off screen is now a bottomless pit is one of those. Secondly, enemies tend to be a bit more infinitely spawning on these layouts, or at least while their spawn points are more clear, they rush you a bit more frequently. And I feel power-ups are generally a bit less generous on these sections as well in the series. At least in Contra 1 and Super C, from my memory, it's been years since I played Contra 3. And even longer since I played Hardcore, because the last time I played Contra Hardcore, the Genesis, I died on the second to last stage, got a game over, read up online that the Japanese version had like 3 hit points, and just never played the game after that. Maybe I'll get to that game eventually. But now we have an elevator segment. We can do nothing but wait here. There is nothing you can do to speed up the game. And because of this, it's probably one of my least favorite stages in the game. Now, one pretty cool thing about this game is that it's one of the few NES games I'm aware of that has an active sound test you can access. If you press, I think it's by holding A and B and then pressing start on the title screen, you just get access to a sound test. I think that was also in the Japanese version of Contra 1 in one of the great SNES games. But I'm always thankful for games from this era that give you a sound test, because in the case you like the music a lot of a game, you can just bring it up on your CRT and then just listen to the music like you're doing your homework. I love it when games do that. Though I think there was also a stage select in the Japanese version of this game that was like holding down in one of the other buttons on the title screen, then pressing start, and then you can choose which area to go from there. Contra games, partially just due to the lack of dialogue within them, are not exactly games I seek out in one language versus the other. Though that does bring up, I brought up Probotector earlier because that's the name this series had in the PAL region. I think it still did up to the end, or at least the most recent game, where they changed the main characters into robots because of violence laws against marketing violent games to children at the time. By the way, we're on to the stage of this, boss of this stage, Evil Chandelier. The way this thing works, it moves left and right, firing lasers down from left to right. It never alternates from that pattern. You need to take out the individual turrets, and this actually makes the boss easier as you go on. As while it moves faster, the time between its laser volleys actively gets longer because it's still trying to fire from the broken turrets. If you have the spread gun, that might very well be, if not the easiest boss in the game, probably the second easiest next to either the boss of Stage 2 or Stage 1. Alright, Area 5, we're over halfway through the game, and this is probably, if not the hardest stage in the game, the second hardest. It's the only vertically structured stage that plays like the waterfall stage with the giant alien tower boss fight in Contra 1. We are constantly climbing up here, and the platforming isn't too hard, but there are times where enemies will just spawn at the last second and hit you. And if that happens, well, you're going to be upset because there was no way you could have seen that enemy coming. Thankfully, I think enemy spawners tend to generate less enemies when you're right next to them, or at least if they're a certain height on the screen. So as long as you're progressing at a decent pace and take your time whenever you're getting close to the edge of a screen, you should be safe. But if you're rushing, you can encounter some problems here. Also, be careful of these jetpack enemies, as while they fly up and down the screen pretty slowly, the speed at which they actively move left and right towards you is deceptively fast. I say Contra 3, Super C is a easier game than Contra 1, and I think that is true. With that said, it's still Contra, and therefore, if you're not used to these kind of games, it can cause some problems. Especially these rocks. Because these rocks, they spawn infinitely, and sometimes they just spawn wherever the screen scrolls a certain amount, like that one there. And because of that, you can get easily blindsided. With that said, something I didn't know until about 2 years ago was that you could actively destroy them. I thought you just had to dodge around them, but no, you can just mash the fire button and they will eventually get destroyed. I don't know why I'm impressed that's in the game, but I am. Also, a very weird difference for the PAL version that I've seen very rarely in other PAL games is that the background music's tempo was increased, and I don't exactly understand why they did that for Probotector. It still sounds good, I just prefer this tempo. With that said, it's time for the boss of Stage 5. This is the Crypto Crustacean, I think? This is probably the hardest boss in the game, purely because of how busy it is. The crustacean will move left and right at the top of the screen, eventually doing a little dive down like this to try and hit you, while firing out 2 enemies from either side at a point, 2 skulls that you can destroy pretty easily with a shot, or 3 little tracking mines that try to follow onto you. This fight can be hard because, depending on your shot type, you'll probably spend more time trying to actively keep yourself safe by destroying the projectiles it shoots out rather than shooting the boss fight. With that said, spread gun, again, a pretty joyous thing of help. And now we're in the second and last top-down stage in the game. This one's a bit more annoying than the first one, though, as while there's not as much directly in your way, it's a bit more random because of these lips, which I should note in the manual are called lip-o-suctions. They spawn semi-randomly, I believe, and if you destroy them, they'll just respawn after a second or two in the exact same place.
Thankfully, with other annoying enemies in this stage, like those weird mother brain-looking things that just crowd in on you and try to home in, you can take care of them pretty easily if you have the spread gun, similarly with this section where there's a lot of projectiles homing in on you. Point is, get the spread gun, it makes your experience a lot easier. With that said, I feel Contra is a game where if you're good at spatial awareness of your character versus what's around you, you'll find it a bit easier than people who don't have that good amount of sense with that. Because, like, if you're good at, like, bullet hells, like Ikaruga, Toho, things of that nature, honestly, Toho probably isn't that hard of a game for you, period. With that said, we're already onto the boss of Stage 6. This weird triple alien head. It fires shots diagonally and straight forward and dies pretty quickly. It also shoots mines out of the weird little hand slots, but that's nothing much to worry about. But that's also only Phase 1. Phase 2 is a bigger alien head, which also looks decisively more like the alien queen from Xenomorphs, from Aliens, just with an actual face. This thing's a bit harder because its projectiles actively track into you, but it's also very easy because you can destroy those projectiles with your gun. The little worm that will spawn out of either side of the hands isn't too much to worry about with the spread gun, but if you're not careful, that thing can surprise you with how quickly it can move. Alright, Area 7. We're on the second to last stage already, and this is probably the most mechanically interesting stage. The entire stage is kind of an inverse on the two other vertical scrolling stages we've had where we're moving downwards. And that actively makes it easier than the ones where you're scrolling upwards, as you can see enemies coming from a bit further away. Plus, you'll have the high ground, which if you have the spread gun, which moves slightly diagonally downwards, you can just stay completely out of harm and be safe. Later on in the stage, we do have a bit of a unique mechanic for the game, where we're going to have little platforms we need to shoot down through to reach the boss fight. The only problem that could cause, though, is that there are occasionally enemies that will spawn out of the top of the screen, and if you're making your area too thin, you can be very easily trapped in there with them. I think every single, I don't even know what to describe this material as, egg, takes 3 shots to destroy, so as long as you got some good mashing skills, you should be pretty safe. The latter half of the stage is more of the same from the first, only except instead of those weird purple mouth towers, we have xenomorph eggs that spawn out xenomorph baby facehuggers. But if you fire the spread gun, again, they don't get much of a chance to spawn, and anything that does spawn will be killed quickly enough that you don't need to worry about it. You know, games really loved taking monsters from Alien, didn't they, back in the 80s? I say that as if Sakura Wars didn't do that for most of its existence, too, until I think the most recent one stopped doing that or something like that. Alright, now we're on to the boss fight. This is the Temple of Terror. This thing, I think, has 4 different damage points. The core, which will fire out a tracking shot. The mouth/skull, which will fire out more tracking shots, very similarly to the crypto crustacean. And the weird, dripping purple tendril is also technically a damage point. That just spawns slime that tries to fall onto you. This is a fight where if you don't have the spread gun, it's honestly really hard just because the amount of things coming at you at once, similarly to the crypto crustacean, can be a lot to keep track of. And even with the spread gun, it takes a while because taking out the last damage point can be a bit hard if you're not good at getting the right spread gun sprite limit going on. Because I think the spread gun only allows like 10 shots on screen at a time or something like that. And that's stage 7. Now we're on to the final stage. Oh yeah, I should probably note, every one of the stages does actually have a name. Stage 1 was the gates of Fort Firestorm. Stage 2 was Fort Firestorm's Warped Mine Command Center. Level 3 was the Tropics of Torture. Level 4 was the Lair of the Jungle Aliens. Level 5 was the Massacre Mountains. Level 6 was Jagger Foyt's Fruit of the Doom defense line. And level 7 is Radioactive Lava Fields. And this is the Red Falcons Poison Palace. And it's also the final stage. Something you need to keep an eye out, though, is that the mouths in the level design, like the ones at the top right of the screen right now, are active enemies that will spawn shots. So before you get too close to them, I recommend you just take them out preemptively, because they'll save you some pain with jumping later on. Speaking of which, this stage has easily some of the hardest jumps in the game just because it's a bit easy to both under and overestimate the jumps in Contra and Super C, I feel. especially when they're at an incline like this, because you're not exactly easily able to tell what is the platform and what isn't, I feel. With that said, those are probably the two hardest jumps right there, and there might be one more later on. It's, again, I feel even the hardest stages in this game are easier than the hardest stages in Contra 1. Super C is overall, I think, a much more better balanced game, even with the one-hit kills and limited lives. Because I think the lives code only works for the first continue. It's been a while since I actually got an active game over in this game, so I don't remember. This jump can also be a little bit stressful here. And with that, now it's straight on to the final boss, so there is one more mechanic section we have to deal with. The ceiling coming up here is going to collapse and rise in a decent rhythm to try and gimp your jumps, essentially. With that said, every time the ceiling rises back up, it'll also spawn 6 space fetuses for you to destroy for some reason. I don't get that enemy design, but oh well. With that said, the ceiling falling doesn't actively interrupt your jumps as much as you'd think. While it forces you down, your jump arc is so relatively safe anyway that even if it's like halfway down, you'll make it to the other platforms, not much of a risk. And honestly, I was kind of surprised with my pace through the game because I originally was thinking this LP would be 2 parts long. And it was originally, but then those parts were both 11 minutes long-ish, so I figured, why not? Let's just keep it going. Oh no, I died! Shit! Well, there goes spread gun. I'm back in the basic machine gun right before the final boss. Ugh. And the final boss is gonna be the Red Falcon, and I recommend some caution sticking towards the left side of the screen because it raises out of the right side. This giant crab-looking enemy with a face on top, the thing you need to damage is the alien eye thing on the top right of it. The woman's face, you don't have to shoot at all. It's not even an active damage source, it's just part of the enemy design. That said, this boss's only attack is 2 things. It'll fire out bubbles that'll fall onto you, or at least try to fall around your rough position, and it'll fire a red snake out of its eye that just kind of goes straight. If you hug the wall right here that is the leg and shoot upwards diagonally, you're not likely to get hit, period. It's a very easy final boss. And that's Super C. I think Contra 1 is the better multiplayer game, honestly, just because I feel its more chaotic level design makes for more laughs. But as a standalone run-and-gun shooter, I think Super C is the better game. Its music's not as impactful, I feel, but I just haven't played it as much comparatively. It's Contra again, but easier, I feel, is the best way to describe it. It's still got some good music. I love this ending scene. This is really good looking for NES. It's got some cool stuff in it. But honestly, the big leap forward in terms of like mechanics for Contra was probably either Hardcore or Contra 3. I think Contra 3 was the game that came out first out of those, so it would be that. And I'll get to that game eventually. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great night. Take care. And I'll see you guys next Let's Play, whatever that may be. See you guys then. Also, I should actually note, the game at this point would normally boot you back to level 1 on a higher difficulty, I believe, which has more enemies, but it's the same game again, so I'm not showing it off. So yeah, see you then. So yeah, see you guys then.